Hi Lakewood Math 1 students, this is Miss V, and this is the 6th video in your series in your Linear Equations unit bundle, and it's all about graphing by intercepts. Notice at the top of your page, there's some instructions here on how to do this. I would like to come back to those. I'd like to start in a little bit different point. So let's start with problem number 1. The intercepts are where my line hits the x-axis and the y-axis. So if I could find a point on the x-axis where my line goes through and a point on my y-axis where my line goes through, then I could draw my line. And the easiest way to do this is to put in 0 for the opposite value. In other words, if you look at the x-axis, what I know about all the points on the x-axis are that the y value must be 0. I can't have a point on the x-axis that has a y value that is either a positive number or a negative number. It has to be 0. So if I would like to find where this line crosses the x-axis, I can substitute 0 for y. Now you'll notice that when I do that, this term ends up being 0. In essence, it goes away. And so that is why up here in the instructions, the by term just completely disappears. It doesn't actually ever disappear. It's just not there because it becomes 0. So what I notice is I have 3x equals negative 6, or x is equal to negative 2. And that tells me I have a point at negative 2, that's my x value, and the y value is 0. That's because I put a 0 in there for the y value. So if I want to graph this guy using his intercepts, that's the x-intercept. You might have guessed if I want to find the y-intercept, you'll notice that x has to be 0. Because for every point on the y-axis, my x value is 0. So let's go ahead and put in a 0 for x, and we end up getting negative 2y equals negative 6, and when I divide both sides by negative 2, I get 3. So that's this situation where I put in a 0 for x, essentially making that whole term turn to 0. So my y value, or my y-intercept I should say, is 3. I have a point at 0, comma 3. And so now I have 2 points, and we just need 2 points to draw a line. And these are my 2 points. And there's a graph of my line. But notice, instead of using slope-intercept form, this time I used my intercepts, and I left my line in standard form. So these instructions I really kind of am not crazy about because they don't explicitly state why you're covering up the y term to solve and find the x-intercept, and why you're covering up the x term and solving for the y-intercept. And I find if we know why we're doing things, we're much more likely to remember how to do them. So let's do another one. I would like to graph problem number 2, and I would like to do that by finding the intercepts. So I know my y-intercept has to have an x value of 0. Anything on my y-axis, x is 0. And so I substitute a 0 for x, and I solve for y. And when I do that in this equation, I get y is equal to 2. So this tells me I have a point at 0, comma 2. That's my y-intercept right there. And I'm going to do the same procedure to find the x-intercept, but I'm going to put a 0 in for y. And that's what I end up getting when I make my substitution. This term ends up being 0, so I get x is equal to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that ends up being my x-intercept. And I can draw my line just based on these 2 points. And it ends up being a little bit quicker, I think, than trying to turn this equation into slope-intercept form. Let's do one more together. And I think probably doing number 4 together would be more instructive. I am going to find my y-intercept by substituting a 0 for x. So I get 5y equals 20, and when I divide both sides by 5, y is equal to 4. So I have a point at 0, 4. And I'm going to graph that point right there like that. And then I'm going to substitute 0 for y. And when I do that, I can find my x-intercept. So this term ends up zeroing out, and I get negative 4x equals 20. If I divide both sides by negative 4, x is negative 5. So I have a point at negative 5, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's right there, 5. And that's what my line looks like. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to pause the video and take a look at problems 3, 5, and 6, and I'll put the answers up for you right here. So check your work on 3, 5, and 6, and then you can check your work on 7, 8, 9, and 10. Ask good questions and make sure to get the homework for graphing by intercepts.